Hello, welcome to Cordial Curiosity live stream, part 2 with Daniel Ray. I have my friend Doug with me here. He's going to help out. But Daniel, you want to introduce yourself?
Yes. My name is Daniel Ray, and I am a recent graduate of the Houston Baptist University Apologetics Master's course, and I am currently in my exploratory educational stage of being more publicly engaging with Christianity. I've been a Christian for 25 years, and just now taking it on the road, if you will, being a little bit more deliberate in the Great Commission. And so I enjoyed watching Reed's videos and decided to interact and contact him. I like the cordial approach, and here we are. I've also been in the Army for 4 years, and so I think that's pretty much it.
Okay. Daniel, could you tap on your mic on your face? Is that the one you're using?
Is that it? No?
I don't think that's it.
Is this it?
But no.
All right.
While he figures that out, you want to give an intro, Doug?
Well, I think most people watching probably know me already. But so, Daniel, if you don't know me, I was a professing Christian longer than you, 30 years.
Oh, wow.
I have a channel here on YouTube as well. Reed and I like to compete against each other, and he's winning. So I'm not bitter. I'm not at all bitter at all. But yeah, I talk. I have a different style than Reed. But basically, we're kindred spirits. I'm not 100% positive Reed is a human being. I think he's AI. But we're friends nonetheless.
How's that sound now? I switched.
Yes. Much better.
Excellent. Okay, good. Great.
Okay, let's get back to it. So
yes.
After listening back a little bit to our discussion from earlier today, I've revised the argument map a little bit. If you want to see that,
sure. We'll just go with that. Whatever.
Because I think it just gets down to this almost. What do you think? Is this accurate?
Indefeasible, like you can't.
They're not revisable.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we can't switch around Jesus's claims as they are, in a sense.
Yeah, there's nothing that could change your mind about Jesus being a properly basic.
I mean, certainly I could be persuaded. Absolutely. I mean, I'm being a fallible human being. My mind changes. That's part of human nature. But in terms of Jesus as being properly based to the universe, yeah, I would say as it stands, independently of my confidence about that. Yeah, I would agree with these. Yeah.
Okay.
I think so.
All right. So if Jesus's existence is a properly basic belief of yours, but it's also open to revision, does that mean it's actually properly basic?
Well, I say Jesus being properly basic is independent of what I think of it. Of course, that's what I do believe. I affirm the truth of Jesus being the creator of the heavens and the earth. But me being fallible and, like Doug, I mean, he was a Christian for 30 years and changed his mind. Is that because of Christianity, or is that Doug? That's where we have, when we get into the epistemology of it all, that what is it that made Doug conclude Christianity was false? So I guess, no, I don't think Jesus's properly basic existence can be changed according to what I know of the Christian faith. But my mind might change.
If somehow someone were to persuade you that it was not a properly basic belief, would that change your confidence of Jesus existing?
No, I don't think. I mean, I certainly could say that my level of confidence could change. I mean, yes, because I'm a fallible human being, and so I would agree with that in the sense that my confidence level. I think we talked about this in part one. My confidence level doesn't
If you see my videos, I usually
Yes.
give a scale. What would you
Uh-huh.
say your confidence is on that scale from 0 to 100?
Oh, right now my confidence is 100, but I know
Okay.
that doesn't really get into the nature of what I'm actually confident in, the substance of my belief. So I think that, despite a quantified sense of my own confidence, doesn't really say anything about what I'm actually believing,
Yeah. So if you're 100% confident and Jesus' existence is just a properly basic belief, which means it's not open to revision, what's there to talk about?
Oh, how I know it's true? Is that what you?
Sure.
I mean, what are you getting at? There's a lot to talk about.
If there's nothing you could discover to change your confidence about it.
Oh, you're saying because I say it's 100%, I'm unwilling to talk about it, or I couldn't be persuaded otherwise. I mean,
Maybe
you can still be at 100%
maybe,
and still be persuaded otherwise. I mean, that I could say I'm 100%, and then all of a sudden somebody says something and knocks me down to 50. I think you would, from what I've seen, Reed, you would like to hack at people who are not hack, but wrong word, but you like to at least question people's 100%. So just because I say I'm 100% doesn't mean I've got my ears plugged.
Okay.
I mean, I love the discussion. If I didn't think there was anything to discuss, or I wouldn't be willing to listen to other people, there is no point in that. I understand what you're saying.
Hey, Daniel, when you say that you have a properly basic belief, I just want to make sure we're on the same page. What do you mean by that?
I guess it's for me, and not being professionally philosophical in any way, I think it's my starting point. I mean, we all seem to, at least as far as I understand philosophical arguments, philosophical sense of things, we have to begin somewhere. I mean, if you look at Locke or Hume or Kant or Hegel, we all have a particular starting point, right? So for me, when I say properly basic, the extent of my wisdom and knowledge and my understanding of the world ultimately begins in Christ, who gave me life.
Because tell me what you think about this, and I'm just going to read off the definition of an axiom. It's a statement or proposition that is regarded as being established, accepted, or self-evidently true.
Okay.
And so there's 7 billion people on this planet. I'll tell you my presuppositions, and you tell me what you think of them.
Sure.
My first presupposition is that the universe exists, that we don't live in the matrix, that it's real.
Yeah.
My second one is that we can learn things about it.
Yes.
Like the physical constants and so forth,
Absolutely.
and the natures and properties that it has. Mm-hmm. And the third thing is that we can use what we learn to make predictive models and better our lives, that these are useful things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And when I read the definition of axiom, to me that seems pretty well established, pretty accepted, and it seems it comports to our experiences, that the universe is real around us and that we're learning things about it. And so those are my presuppositions. And I think, do you share those presuppositions with me?
I do. I think we could probably unpack more specifically the point of learning. So you talked about use somewhat. I would imagine that goes along with pragmatism, in a sense that knowledge is useful. It has a pragmatic aspect to it. And so when I think of knowledge being useful, I would think that there's some purpose in mind, some end for which we are using our knowledge. So when I say I'm going to use this, I use my pen for writing, I use my cup for coffee. There are certain things that have certain uses, and my knowledge corresponds with that. So when we talk about learning about the universe, what do we do with the knowledge of, say, how suns burn, or what do we do with the knowledge of the debris around Saturn, or what do we do with the knowledge of supernovas, et cetera?
The reason why I even bring this up is to let you know, number one, that I do think everybody has presuppositions, and these are mine.
Yeah.
But number two, I look at, let's say, to me, I view your presupposition, your axiom that the God of the Bible exists and the Bible is his word.
Yes.
I see that as a layer on top of mine, not necessary. And I think you view my presuppositions as a layer on top of mine. That yours is the base, and I view mine as the base.
Right.
Mhm.
I think so. I think that's accurate. Yeah.
And the reason why, but here's my problem with your axiom, whether it's true or not. That number one, it's not well established. The Christians are the minority in the world. They're the largest religion, but they're the minority in worldview. So it's not established. It's not widely accepted, and it's not self-evidently true, according to the definition of axiom. So I guess my first, if you accept that definition of axiom, I guess my question would be, why did you choose that axiom if they're not self-evidently true, if your God isn't widely established and accepted?
I think the first thing I would say was that according to, I mean, you've been in the faith for 30 years, and you know that at times we can expect to be in the unpleasant minority view of when it comes to the world and the various cultures around it. So I'm not sure that the fact that Christianity is not well established on a global scale really is a defeater for faith. The second thing is, no, it's not self-evident, because, as you know, the doctrine of original sin has the noetic effect of sin upon mankind has blinded our eyes, if you will, and there's not anyone that seeks after God, according to Romans.
But you're talking about things that are layered above my presuppositions right now, which we can talk about. But my core question is, why do you start with what I believe is true?
So working from the existence of the universe. So that's properly basic for you. You said that at the outset, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so we take for granted the universe's existence.
Correct.
Do you perceive it through your senses, or does it exist independently of your perception?
That is my presupposition, that the universe exists whether anybody perceives it or not.
So that's true, independent of how people perceive it.
Yeah, and that's why it's a presupposition.
Okay, so in a sense, your universe for you is God for me. That we are presupposing existence. Yeah. So that's where we understand, or at least I think we understand, the way in which we're using the foundational aspect of our precepts.
But this is the core. But the core root though is what I'm asking you is, it seems like no matter what religion you're in, no matter what culture you're raised in, it seems like humanity accepts my presupposition. But the same cannot be said of yours.
Oh, well,
so,
I don't doubt. I share with you that everybody, more or less, everybody accepts the existence of the universe. But when we talk about perceiving the universe, this is where it gets into the evidentiary criteria between theists and atheists. Is the universe divinely created or not? And so I would think that would have to be a part of your presupposition, which you're saying, no, it's not divinely created. Is that correct?
No, that's not my presupposition. It very might well be.
But you're not axiomatically saying that it's not.
Correct.
But
yeah.
Go ahead, Reed.
Yeah, the way I think about it with presuppositions or axioms is that they're logically necessary truths. And by logically necessary, we mean there's no possible conditions under which they are false. There's no possible condition under which the universe not being true is the case. And there's no possible condition under which, like, say, our senses could be like absolutely mistaken.
So both of you are beyond Boltzmann brains then, in terms of your axiomatic acceptance of the existence of the universe. You both are assuming its materiality and that it's trustworthily there.
Mm-hmm.
So where there's no solipsism and no accounting for that. We're just look up and there's the universe, right?
Yeah, that's
At
my
least-
presupposition.
Okay.
At least part of it. Our perception is not perfect, but we can perceive it
Sure.
in some way.
So what it seems, the question that it seems that presupposition seems to beg is, what is the universe?
The universe is that which exists that we can learn things about. So we're continually learning about the universe.
So it is something. How do you account for its? I think it was Sir Arthur Eddington, or no, it was Einstein. I think
There's no accounting in presuppositions. That's why
Yeah.
it's called a presupposition. There's no regress. That's where we stop, right?
So you're not offering a definition of what the universe is. It just is how you're approaching it.
Well, no, we can say things that we know, that we have learned about it.
Okay,
That it's
so like
13.5 billion light years since its early expansion and so forth. We can say stuff like that.
So you axiomatically take the current scientific theories about the universe as part of your axiom.
No.
So we can't say it's 13.5 billion years old.
Not axiomatically.
Not axiomatic. Evidentially, we can.
Okay. All right. So is there anything in that presupposition? It's just the universe exists. So that would be for me like God exists, and that's it. That's kind of how you're approaching it.
But you've gone a step further. Like because a God, however you define it, like if you define it in the like prime mover sense or whatever, that could exist, but your God's still not.
Yeah. It could be possible that a God does not exist in our minds.
And is that part of your axiom, the possibility of God not existing,
No.
or is it?
No.
So
No.
where is God in your axiom? He's not there.
For
It's
me
not
personally,
related.
yeah, for me, that has nothing to do with my presuppositions. Now, since we can learn things, we may learn through evidences that maybe there is this realm called the supernatural. I'm not quite sure what that even means, but that there is something that we don't know, that we haven't learned yet. But so I'm open to the idea of that. But my core presupposition, I think, is shared by almost everyone on the planet. There's a few people who truly believe we live in the matrix, but not too many. So I guess my question is, why did you choose, or how did you figure out that your core proposition should be this God thing, this God concept? And not only that, but the one of the Bible. How did you come to that realization or conclusion that that should be a good axiom?
Well, it came to me, I know this is where the cliffhanger happened this afternoon, where I confessed that the beginning of my faith was my Heavenly Father revealing His Son to me, and the conviction that the Bible was true and that Jesus was the Son of God. Now, I know that's when Reed had a big smile on his face. Do you assume that being convicted of something is a good way to know if something is true? Well, certainly it's a beginning. And from that platform, I'm like, okay, if this conviction is real, because, it could just be like a thought, like, oh, I feel like having coffee or eating a Pop-Tart. It may have been something like that, but because of the strength and the clarity of that conviction, I followed through with it. And that's what I've been doing for 25 years. And I'm still pursuing, refining that knowledge. So I began as a measure of faith in those convictions, and then I tested them, if you would. I went through I read the Bible, and I took notes and watched how it played out in my life. And then I started to learn more about it, and then read all the books, and then started getting into apologetics and the philosophies, and watching atheist videos and reading atheist books and taking formal courses. So it's been a 25-year journey that is still a journey in progress. So axiomatically, to me, the universe is the handiwork of Christ, the triune God of Father, Son, Holy Spirit. In Genesis, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. They were not self-generated. They didn't come about by themselves. So I think the universe emanated from an intelligent being, specifically Jesus, specifically the triune God of the Christian faith. And I act on faith in that regard. So I go back one step further. Rather than presupposing the universe as pre-existing, I presuppose a divine being pre-existing, being responsible for the universe.
Reed, do you want to ask a question? I got one right here in my head. It's just bursting, ready to burst out.
Write it down and burst it out. I will.
Everything you just said, Daniel, and please understand, I'm not taking anything away from your personal experiences.
Oh, I'm okay, Doug. I'm not going to be offensive.
But everything you just said could be said of someone of a different religion, and say and then say therefore my God's true.
I completely agree with you.
So if you agree with me that the way you came to this belief can be used by someone else and arrive at a different conclusion, would you agree with me that's not a reliable method then?
Well, I will answer that question this way. Let's say I'm a carpenter. I have a child who is learning how to use a hammer for the first time. And he comes to me, I set up a nail and a piece of wood where he can't hurt himself. And I said, go ahead and tap this in for me and come and tell me when you're done. Well, he comes back into the house and he says, Daddy, it's not working. And I go out and I said, well, son, show me how you're using the hammer. And he proceeds to take the heavy head end of the hammer and starts hitting the nail with the rubber handle. Now, I can see what the problem is. It's not the hammer. It's the child's use of the hammer. And so when someone suggests to me that faith is the epistemic problem, I'm assuming they've been able to separate the epistemic tool from the individual that's using the tool, and to be able to say point blank that it's faith that's the problem rather than the subjectivity of the individual who's using faith.
Okay, but Daniel, how do you know you're not the child in your analogy?
Oh, I am a child, but I'm just saying what, in answer to your question about whether or not faith is the problem, this is what we need to clarify. How do you know that faith epistemically is the issue and it's not the person? So that's my question for you. I don't know how I would be able to say that the problem is faith and not the person. How do you know the difference between the two? How do you know?
Let me ask the question a different way. If I have a ruler that constantly, the numbers on the ruler constantly change. Let's say it's an electronic ruler or something, but the numbers keep moving back and forth. I think we would agree that ruler is not going to reliably give us a measurement.
Right, but that's an empirical thing like a hammer, whereas faith is not as well. It's not empirical, so we don't have that benefit of perceiving faith as we do an object, and that's where I think the rub lies in saying that faith is the problem. Well, I don't see faith like a tool or a hammer. I must metaphysically, epistemically assume.
Okay, how do you see faith? What exactly is faith to you?
Well, and this is good. We needed to get to this point. What is faith? Is it how Dr. Boghossian defines it, or is it how the Bible defines it? Or
I don't care how anybody else defines it except for you right now.
We need to agree on a definition, don't we? So we can talk.
No, I will accept any definition you give me.
Okay, so I will take the classical Orthodox Christian definition that faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. And that's how I would proceed. I know Dr. Boghossian calls it a deepity in his book, but that's the definition.
So can someone take that definition of faith, apply it to their own life, and come up with a different conclusion than you did?
Sure. And my question is, or how do we know if it's faith or the person using the faith that is the problem with the multitudinous nature of the conclusions that people come to? Is it the person or is it the tool they're using? And when we're talking about epistemic constructs, we don't see it like a hammer or a ruler. So how do you separate the tool, the epistemic tool, from the individual wielding it? Because I could turn around and say, well, there's a lot of atheists that use reason to come to various different conclusions. Does that make reason unreliable, or is it the person wielding the reason that makes it unreliable?
Yeah, that's a good point. So how would you answer your question? Is there a way to figure out if it's the person or the tool?
Yeah, I think you have to stand upon some kind of epistemic ground, sight unseen, to be able to make that assessment. Because finally, what we're talking about are intellectual constructs that neither you or I can see, like we can see each other on the video. So I think we come to a point sight unseen about our beginning of our knowledge. And so I can say that by what I believe, I'm making assessments and judgments and living in accordance with a standard that I believe is true. And hopefully it corresponds. So you do have to live a life by faith, whether you're an atheist or a Christian or a non-religious or a philosopher. I mean, if you just leave religion off the table for a second, all of a sudden you're finding yourself in a variegated sea of different philosophies. And how do you use reason and logic to come to the conclusion of which of these philosophies is true? So I think epistemically, humanity shares the same boat. We have to begin sight unseen with something we believe is true and axiomatic. So like your idea that the universe exists is a premise that you take as absolutely axiomatic, but beginning with the universe itself, that act is an act of faith.
It's an act of faith to have that presupposition?
Yeah, that's the beginning starting point, that this exists, that it may not. I mean, without on a skeptical atheistic worldview, but maybe the universe doesn't exist.
Is it fair to say for beliefs other than our axioms, they are not faith-based if we use empiricism?
Oh, I'm a fan of empiricism. If I get on an airplane, I hope it works. I hope they've tested it. But I think empirical idea, things that are deduced empirically and things that we think about metaphysically are two different categories in terms of knowledge.
Yeah. So it is my argument map representing your thinking accurately, or is it off?
I'm reading it at the moment.
You can click on me and you should be able to see it.
I don't see anything that, okay, evidence. Now, you only have, I was convinced in personal experience. That's the beginning of it. But I would say that I'm not saying that's the soul's evidence of the reality of Christianity, but that's my starting point. So
yeah, the source for your being convicted is just your personal experience.
Okay, I see how you're working that. Yeah, I don't see anything that I would disagree with.
Okay. So we're going down to just faith, and you're saying faith is the evidence of things not seen, so we can use the evidence of things not seen to be justified to believe Jesus exists?
It is the primary way in which I think believers access Jesus, by faith. Without faith, it is impossible to please God. Doug, I'm sure you know that scripture.
Is there anything people could use? Like, couldn't people use this reason for it believing in anything?
Absolutely, Reed. That's exactly the issue I'm bringing up. That you could use a hammer for just about any. You could crack walnuts. You could smash eggs. You could do anything with a hammer. Is there a purpose for which the hammer was designed? Is there a purpose for the epistemic tool of faith? When we're talking about knowledge and the purpose of knowledge, what do we use faith for? And I would assume that because of the critique leveled at faith by Dr. Boghossian and the street epistemology movement, that they assume that faith exists. No? Is it at least
saying the purpose of faith is to believe in a God?
Well, the purpose of, I think fundamentally that is the ground of how we not only know God, but that how we begin to know anything. I mean, as I was saying to Doug, I think you have to begin sight unseen in some kind of.
What does that exactly mean, sight unseen?
Well, you can't see. Well, let's just take the idea of an axiom. I mean, it's a written down definition, but the idea of an axiom is not something I can show like I can show you my pen. You can show me the black squiggles, you can speak a voice sound, but there's nothing physical about an axiom or a proposition.
Okay, so sight unseen just means an axiom then, basically.
It means non-empirical, non-physical, metaphysical in the terms of the intellect. The realm of ideas. I'm kind of Platonic, but there's a whole realm of knowledge. I mean, knowledge itself is not tangible. There's an intangibility to our knowing. Would you agree?
No.
So knowledge is physical?
Yes.
In what way?
It takes takes
Go ahead.
biology, and if I had no atoms in my brain, I would know nothing.
Okay, so well, I understand what you're saying, but the atoms in your brain, if you look at an MRI or however you would access them, don't give you some kind of way of understanding whether or not your atoms are speaking truth or in accordance with truth. Because what if our brain atoms don't agree with one another? Then what do we do?
Use tools to come to a consensus.
Yeah, we test it. Like, for example, if your atoms in your brain say that when you throw a ball, it's going to go 50 yards, and if my atoms in my brain say that same person throwing it will go 80 yards, all we have to do is run the experiment, and whoever was closer or correct, that were the atoms in the brain that was correct and true.
So that is one kind of knowledge. That's a testable, empirical, positivist kind of knowledge. But what about the idea of justice? Was justice done in the courtroom in regards to a punishment or an acquittal, or love? Or how do we can't test those kinds of constructs in a physical sense? I mean, I can throw a football, but a football is not going. We can't. What kind of test do you do to see whether or not justice was done?
Yeah, go ahead, Reed.
If we could account for abstract ideas like justice and love and
Right.
and beauty like that,
Yeah.
Would that change your confidence in a God existing?
Show me a non-abstract concept of justice that is grounded in.
I mean, if we could account for the existence of abstract stuff like that without a God.
I don't see how that could be done at the present time, but I would be open to seeing how it could be done, certainly.
So if that could be accounted for without a God, how would that change your confidence? Would it at all change your confidence?
It would certainly depend on the quality of the convictions of people that have come up with this idea. How would you finally demonstrate that you've found the physiological axiomatic base of justice in the brain? That would be an impressive feat.
It would depend on the convictions of, well, if it was found to be true and reliable that we could account for these types of things without a God, would that change your confidence?
Well, it's in a hypothetical situation. I could say that a loss of a loved one might change my confidence, or a bad prognosis. There's a lot of things because of my fallibility that would reduce the quantified amalgam that is my 100%. And certainly I've been through points in my life where it hasn't been, 100%. So positing a scenario, I could only say possibly. I don't know. I couldn't say for sure, but I would certainly say because of my permeability, my finite knowledge and everything like that.
I'm only asking because if it has no effect on your confidence, then we should go for another reason to discuss why you think it's true.
Yeah, I agree. I like keeping things really grassroots, bare bones, rubber hits the road type ideas. So let's say you, Daniel, and another person from a different religion sitting side by side, and I don't believe in Jesus, and let's say this person is a Muslim and says, my axiom is that the Quran is the holy word of Allah, and you both can't be right because Christianity is exclusive.
Mm-hmm.
How would I figure out which one of you two guys is correct? If both of you are wrong? Is there any way I could figure that out?
I would imagine, yeah, you could examine both of the claims for yourself, and I could certainly. Was that a sort of a lead-in? Do you want me to share with you why I think it's true?
Yeah, like what specifically would you point me to?
Oh, okay. In terms of why I would
that I could figure out that like one of you is wrong. So how would I figure out which one of you is wrong?
And
or if both of you are wrong?
Preferably these reasons, if you found out they were not reliable, would change your confidence.
Okay, so the things I'm going to share, if they were demonstrated to be true, you would ask me whether or not that would shatter my confidence or shake it or change it.
If they were demonstrated to be false, they would change your confidence.
Okay, I would begin with the life, teachings, and death and resurrection of Christ. I would encourage a gospel examination of the life and teachings of Jesus, and look through them and read them and examine those at face value. And that's what I did when I first became a Christian. I read through Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and finding that, later on in the historical aspect of Jesus's life, there has not been anyone that has been under more historical scrutiny as a person than the risen Christ and his words and his teachings. Most religions have something to say about Jesus. And, his claims were very exclusive as well. And even the Quran speaks of Jesus, but says that Jesus was only a prophet of Allah and not the divine Son of God. The other aspect of Christianity that seems that makes it credible to me is the way in which the Old and New Testaments came together. The 66 books that were written over the course of millennia that have a cohesive unity to them in terms of talking about who Jesus is. And this is what Jesus says in Luke 24, that he's talking to his disciples on the road to Emmaus, and attesting from Genesis through the prophets and all the writings about how they point to him. And so there's that. And then there's the resurrection. There's probably been nothing more hotly debated since it occurred than Jesus's rising from the dead. And there's no other religion of which I'm aware and in which God as man comes down to man and allows himself and subjects himself to the level at which he does with his creation. They put him to death, they hate him, they reject him, and he suffers an agonizing death on Calvary and then rises from the dead.
Okay, Daniel, you gave a lot there already.
So I didn't know how far you want me to go. Sorry, guys.
Okay, that's great, because now we're talking evidence.
Yeah.
So here I am. I see you, Daniel, who's a Christian, and I see my friend Raza, who I talked to yesterday, who's a Muslim. And I'm trying to figure out which one of you two is correct, or if you're both just blowing smoke. But we are on the same team, Daniel and I and Reed. We all want to believe what's true. And you said, okay, just look at the historical aspects of Jesus. You mentioned how the Old Testament and New Testament came together. You mentioned prophecy. You mentioned the evidence for the resurrection. And you mentioned that there's no other religion like Christianity. Would you say you're confident, you have extreme confidence on each of those points? Or is there one that's like...
Well, I'm not a theologian or biblical scholar, admittedly. My knowledge of Scripture is one of that of a laity. But I would say that my confidence in those, I would be much more. I think you could say that my knowledge of the resurrection, in terms of the resurrection being the linchpin, I suppose, if you will. If you want to really hang on something, we could do that.
Okay, like I'm not a theologian or a historian or a scholar in a New Testament or Old Testament studies, but I've listened to people who are,
yeah,
and who have spent their life studying this stuff, know the languages. Mm-hmm. And it seems to me, now, if I'm coming from a veil of ignorance and I really want to figure out what's true, and I'm doing the same for you as the Muslim, I'm looking at the historical evidence and so forth. It seems to me that the scholars who believe in a physical resurrection of a man named Jesus, they're all believers. They're all Christians.
Sure.
And it seems like all the scholars who study the Quran, who believe that Muhammad did fly into the heavens on a winged beast, or that Gabriel did help Muhammad write the Quran, they're all believers. They're all Muslim. Sure. And now me as someone who values truth, I look at that and go, why is it that all the secular or Jewish scholars don't buy the resurrection of Jesus and don't even think Jesus was the Messiah? What are they thinking, and what are the Christians missing that they're seeing? And so that is a good reason for me to doubt it. The experts don't agree. And so therefore, maybe I should listen to these experts, and maybe they're wrong. Maybe one of the experts is wrong, or many of them, but still that should leave a little bit of doubt in my mind. You hear what I'm saying?
Oh, I do. I'm just giving you the space I don't want to interrupt.
So if I hear you give these lists of evidences, mm-hmm. and at the same time say you're 100% confident, why is it that you're 100% confident and not leave a little room of doubt because of the experts in the field, when they study the history, they don't agree?
Well, let me ask and I think my question will probably answer you. You don't agree that, I don't think you would assume that scholarship makes something true. Would you? You wouldn't agree with that, would you, Doug?
Yeah, I agree with you. That
Okay, so scholars by themselves don't solve the problem, because you could quote scholars and I could quote scholars and they come to different conclusions. Right?
But we're talking about reasons to believe something.
Right, absolutely. Yeah. But scholarship could be leveraged to justify, peanut butter is great for weight loss, right? Researchers at Berkeley University say this. So I assume, since you've been a believer, you've rejected it, correct?
I don't believe that. I do not believe, but I don't say I know, but I do not believe that there was a man named Jesus who rose from the dead in bodily form.
So you take a opposite tact of the scholarship, of Christian scholarship, that talks about the resurrection.
To me, it seems, I ask myself the what's more likely question.
Okay.
So what's more likely to you, Daniel, that a man named Jesus rose from the dead after 3 days, or a book just says he did, and maybe it didn't happen? What's more likely? What's more likely to you?
Well, for me, the resurrection, because I believe, is, obviously there's a bias to believe this, but I think you bring up a good point, Doug, in terms of likelihood. You begin with the center point of what seems likely to you as a person, and I know that's what we must all do. But the likelihood question is a very subjective one. It may not seem likely to me that a man landed on the moon. We have scientific evidence for that. It may not seem likely to me that somebody loves me, but that whether or not something seems likely to me doesn't necessarily determine if this is true or not. So on your objection to Christianity, that it doesn't seem likely, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's not true.
I agree with you.
Yeah. So,
but why do you choose to believe an unlikely thing?
Well, I think the world gives us plenty of reasons to believe in things that are not likely. I think the history of science proves that, and just science. And the world is a surprising place. And I think perhaps to answer your question directly, Doug, I think that, reality it comprises a lot more than what I'm aware of personally, and a lot more of what I can possibly know in a lifetime. All I can tell you is that the unlikeliness of this, I was not looking for Christianity, and having it come to me in the way that it did, my initial questioning of it and wondering if my convictions were true. And then, 25 years later, I'm still going through the Bible and trying to live in accordance with its precepts. I find that there's nothing particularly wrong with believing in something that's unlikely.
Would you say that Muhammad flying on a winged beast to the heavens is likely?
No, I have a standard by which I can assess that claim, and I don't think it's true. I mean, now it may be that I agree that I believe Muhammad was a historical figure, but I have a standard of evidence in front of me that enables me to say that the Quran is not true when it comes to who Christ is. And, maybe Muhammad was capable of doing some miraculous things or having some miraculous things happen to him. But in terms of the ultimate truth of the text, I'm using one measurement standard to assess the claims of the Quran. And I assess the Quran based on the truth of Scripture. And I think, but everybody has a standard by which they assess any religious claim, even if a non-theist is making theological claims, even though they're tacit. You have rejecting theism, you reject all kinds of gods. And so in a sense, that is a theological claim you're making. I would know, which basically the tacit idea is I would know what God looks like if he really was real. That seems to be what the confines of the skeptic's intellect when he says there's no evidence. He's making a theological claim that tacitly says.
I guess, like, if getting back to my original question, I'm a person who's on a road to seeking truth, and I see a man make a claim that Islam is true, and more specifically that Muhammad flew into the heavens on a winged beast, and it's written in a book. Why is that any different than what you believe, as far as it's written in a book but yours is just a man rose from the dead, and his is a man flew into the heavens. What makes your evidence better than his evidence?
Well, the one who resurrected from the dead is alive. I don't know that in terms of the limited interaction I've had with, I had a Muslim acquaintance when I was in the military. And, you know, he's very devout, prayed 3 times a day, and I've read parts of the Quran. But what it seems to me that a lot of what it seems to me is that the people learn the Quran by rote. In other words, the personal interaction with Allah is not like the personal relational interaction of God with his people in Christianity. So the God of the universe is alive and is communicating to people all the time. And so I would say that the living God, the true and living God, is a revelatory God and reveals himself to people and has relationships with people. This is a tenet of the Christian faith, that Jesus comes and lives with us and gives us the helper, the Holy Spirit. It's a very relational point of Christianity, where in the Quran and in Islam, you have to earn Allah's favor, and you're not really in any kind of communicate with Allah to the extent that you are with Christ and the intimate fellowship that Christians claim to have.
Does the fact that Christianity is unique make it true?
No.
Okay.
I'm not saying its uniqueness makes it true. I'm just saying it's unique. It's unique. I mean, that's all I'm saying.
Okay, but I'm after truth. So
sure.
So I no offense, but I have to disregard what you just said, because everything you said, you're describing uniqueness. The Quran doesn't say this. The Christianity does.
Well, how about I back up and say this? Jesus claims that he is the way, the truth, and the life, and that no one comes to the Father except through him. So as a skeptic seeking truth, how would you assess that claim of Jesus? What would you do with that?
Well, there's many possibilities. One, he never even made the claim.
Sure. But how would you, as a skeptic, assessing that? Because it's a claim. Here it is in the Bible. Yeah. How do you, what are the grounds for rejecting it?
Well, historians, that's their job. They try to figure out what likely happened in the past. And they would say, well, is there 2 or more independent sources and so forth? Yeah. So you could use that route. But even once you get to that, let's say you do have 2 or more independent sources, that Jesus made that claim, the claim itself doesn't make it true.
No, but how do you, in your confident rejection of it, I don't mean that in a slight, but in your confident rejection of it, obviously there's something against which you're measuring, that enables you to make that claim that Jesus, that those aren't words to be considered or worthy of a God, or however you would choose.
Yeah, and it's that's a great question, and it's exactly what I said earlier. I asked myself the what's more likely question, and if I see someone make a claim that they will rise from the dead, and make a claim that they will die, and then another person makes a claim, oh, we saw this person rise from the dead. These are claims.
Sure.
These are historical claims, which may or may not be true. But I ask myself, what's more likely? Did this actually happen? Like, I think you and I would agree, someone rising from the dead after 3 days, it's pretty extraordinary. Yeah, it's wild. It's extraordinary.
Yes. And
if I choose to believe this based on that evidence, what else am I compelled to believe in based on similar evidences?
So really what I'm hearing you're saying, Doug, and I hope I'm not putting words in your mouth, dude. I don't want to be misunderstanding you, that your rejection of the claims is that because to you, it seems unlikely, because you're asking yourself the question and you're saying, self, how likely is this? And you're saying, well, not likely. Is that?
Yeah, I would. Yeah, that's close. I would say the evidence doesn't match the claim.
Okay.
Because if I use that same standard of evidence, the level of evidence, textual claims, then I'm kind of forced to say, well, maybe I do have to believe in alien abductions now, because that's even better evidence than the Bible. We got live witnesses we can talk to eye to eye, face to face. But I doubt that as well. And I doubt, of course, the Quran. So if I also say, okay, I'm going to accept the New Testament at face value, what else am I compelled to take at face value now?
Well, I guess when you brought up the term evidence, do you think that we get into the conundrum of human subjectivity and determining the validity of
yes,
kind of evidence? Yes.
And this is why I brought up the experts before.
So you have made the assessment that the evidence is insufficient. Is that correct?
Not only me, I'm talking about the experts as well.
Oh,
so
sure. I understand that, but
and this is the difference between, I think, taking a position of being agnostic about it and highly doubting it versus, making a claim, oh yes, this is true. Like, for example, I think if we asked all 7 billion people on this planet, if I let go of this pen, will it fall down? And assuming I'm not, upside down right now.
In the space station, right?
I'm here on Earth. Yeah. I think.
Have you seen that video, by the way, with the astronaut problem? It's a meme where the astronaut has problems, and he has his coffee in his hand, and he lets it go and turns and expects it's going to be there floating. It's funny. I'm sorry.
But I guess where I'm going with this is, no matter what your bias is, no matter what culture you were raised in, no matter where you live, no matter what your religion, it seems like there's certain things in this world that we can say with a high degree of confidence, so high that we say we know it. But I would say when it comes to claims of a man rising from the dead or another man flying into the heavens on a winged beast, I think that's a little different. I think we can't say we know this, and I don't even think we can say, I'll speak for myself. I don't think I can say that I can have a high level of confidence in that's actually true. And I care about truth. I really do.
Sure. So your lack of confidence is kind of the inverse of the street epistemologist approach, where your lack of confidence suggests that the belief is not true. Is that what I'm hearing you saying?
I would just say I do not believe it's true. Do I know it's not true? No.
But your lack of confidence certainly does contribute to your skepticism.
To my beliefs, yeah.
Yeah. So it's the inverse of the street epistemologist's approach to a high level of confidence in faith. Your low level of confidence in the text suggests that it's not true.
Yeah,
not
I'm hearing.
Yeah, just because we lack a belief in something or doubt something doesn't mean we have confidence in that something's falsehood.
No, but it is a strong argument that is leveled at the positive claim that your lack of confidence, as it being true, as I see it, it would be inverse. My lack of confidence suggests that this belief is not true. It's a weighty thing. I mean, it works. I think it works inversely in skepticism. We're not confident of this, therefore, maybe, probably not. Not to say outrightly that there is no God, but the lack of confidence that you exude toward faith seems to suggest that it's not true. That's how I have perceived the street epistemologist approach. In terms of, your high level of confidence doesn't necessarily mean it's true. So inversely, a low level of confidence in something would likewise mean something is true.
Daniel, I agree with everything you just said. I really do. But the real question is, we're 3 human beings on this planet who are trying to figure out what's true and what's not.
Sure.
And so the question is, how do we arrive at this thing called truth?
Do we all agree it exists?
Yeah,
Yes.
I would say there's different. I don't think there's truth singular. I think there's truths plural.
Okay, Doug, let's start there. How would you know that at all? In terms of, let's not use physical examples, but
by definition, I would say that there's types of truth like almost axiomatic truth. Like I know that it's true that I'm not omniscient.
Yeah. Okay.
That's almost by definition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Me too.
I know that I'm not your God, things like that.
Right.
And I do think there's things like subjective truth.
Sure.
It's true that Reed has more hair than both of us.
Absolutely. He even said when we first hooked up last night, he has Carl Sagan eyebrows. And I'm like, sorry, Reed. Maybe you didn't want anybody to know that.
You and I could go to a doctor and maybe get some pills and something. Maybe a year from now, that might not be true. So
right. So we could have a full head of hair. Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
But I guess, Doug, my question is, when it comes to non-empirical, I don't know how else to say it, forgive my lack of expertise in the vocabulary, non-empirical metaphysical truth or truths. Do you believe in such things or such a thing?
No.
No.
So
because I don't even know what that
you,
means.
so you don't believe in that, but that no is in a metaphysical rejection of
No,
yeah.
that's also wrong.
No, you're rejecting a metaphysical reality.
No,
right?
no. I said I don't believe it. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist and it's
Okay,
not
so
real.
you're just saying you don't believe it. I see. So I see. You're differentiating between it actually existing and you're saying it doesn't exist.
Yeah,
What reason should we believe in a metaphysical reality?
Is there such a thing? I mean, do you guys accept the reality of metaphysical things?
I
hesitate to say supernatural, but metaphysical, non-physical reality.
Like what?
Knowledge, epistemology, for example.
Concepts?
Well, we could just like epistemology, the philosophy and epistemology. Is that a non-physical, metaphysical reality or not?
I think it's a function of the brain.
So when we got back into this, how do we differentiate between two functioning brains? And you offered the physical test, but in terms of ideas and metaphysical concepts, how do you test those? If it's just brain science in the end.
Oh, that's easy. We can hook up MRIs and.
So an MRI of my brain will tell me whether or not I'm thinking truth or falsehood. Is that what you're saying?
Well, it depends on what you're looking at, but scientists can hook up things to your brain, and let's say give you a binary choice between 0 and 1, and it can predict with like something like 98% accuracy what you're going to choose before you're even aware of it.
Okay, but that doesn't tell me that the choice I'm making is between a truth and a falsehood. I might be choosing a 1 or a 0, but am I choosing what is that electrochemical activity demonstrably showing the MRI specialist that I am thinking in accordance with truth and reality?
No, that you're right there, but there are other tests we could use to figure out if something's true or not. So
I'm thinking of John 14:6, what we were talking about earlier, that my brain is lighting up as I'm thinking Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. How does the MRI specialist look at my head and go, that guy really knows what he's talking about? I don't see how that would work. I'm not an MRI specialist, but I don't think you could determine the truth of Scripture
you're
by
right.
looking at a brain.
Yeah, you're right that the MRI cannot capture those types of questions, but we can test those other questions like that. So for example, let's say you have a model of reality or of the world, you have a worldview. Mm-hmm. And if based on that worldview, if you make a prediction and it comes true, then we can say what that worldview is based on may actually be true because that prediction has happened. It came. And not only that, it over and over and over again.
Sure, we're getting into empirical science again, though. We're not talking about whether or not what Jesus said was true, and that's what we're getting down to: the metaphysical claims of religion, not only religion but philosophy. The idea that the metaphysical claims in Scripture or in Kant or Hume or Descartes cannot be assessed through physical brain chemistry alone. You correspond with human beings who deal in this realm of metaphysical concepts and ideas, and an MRI can't solve the Descartesian dualism problem. But I can't do a brain scan and see if I think therefore I am, or Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life just by pinning electrodes to my brain. I don't see how you solve that problem that way.
But if we are seekers of truth and we want to try to get as close as we can to truth,
but you've denied the metaphysical reality of truth, though.
No.
You say you don't believe it.
Yes, I really need you to understand the difference between belief and knowledge.
Yeah. I don't.
I believe the U.S. is going to have a recession in the next 2 years. Do I know that? No. Do I believe it? Yes.
Okay.
That I think is a great example of the difference between belief and knowledge. So you can believe a lot of things and admit freely that you don't know. With even 90, it doesn't even have to be 100% certainty. So. But there are predictive models. There's things we can do empirically to help us get closer to this thing called truth. And you're talking about metaphysical things and all that. To be honest, I don't care about that. What I want to know is if something is true, we should be able to apply it, use it. We should be able to see results. We should be able to test it. And if we can't test it, then how do we know it's true? If we can't falsify it, how do we know it's true?
The idea that something must be falsifiable in order to be true, how do you test that?
Well,
because that seems to me a metaphysical claim in and of itself that needs justification.
To me, it's a matter of confidence. And I'm just telling you very honestly, very matter-of-factly, that if you, and take it off religion, just put it on anything. If you say X will happen based on Y and Z, and it does, my confidence will go up with what you're talking about, what you're saying.
Sure.
When it comes to religion, it seems there is nothing even close to that, where it doesn't matter if you were born in India or United States or Finland. It seems like what people believe about this, what you call metaphysical, is all over the map. And so me as a person just looks at that and say, should I be confident in that? And me personally, I say, no, I can't. I just, if I'm going to be someone who values truth, I have to be honest with myself and say, you know what? Maybe they're right, but I just can't believe it because of all the variations in methods and conclusions. And it's like, does that make sense?
Yes. So let me try to articulate what you're saying. So because we're taking religion off the table for just a minute, and we're just talking about metaphysical constructs, right?
I don't even know what metaphysical really is. So
well, I don't know how better to clarify it. Non-physical abstracts, things, well, epistemology, philosophy, anything of non-tangible that we accept nonetheless. Logic, truth, reason is not a physical thing. So based on what I'm hearing you saying, because of the variety of different conclusions that people come to about the non-physical realm, you find that it is just simply off the table, unintelligible. You don't believe there's any reality to a metaphysical concepts because of the confusion that people come to in relying upon it.
Yeah, the last part you said is correct. Okay. I think you were about to go down the to the rejection stage. And I think that's a common misconception a lot of believers have, that, oh, if you're an atheist, that means you say there's no God.
No, I don't.
Or there is no whatever other realm out there.
No, you claim to be relatively unconvinced, but not saying with certitude. I think you have a few firebrand certitudists out there, but by and large, sure. There are mostly cautious people that would. But getting back to what you had asked me before, Doug, the idea of what truth is for you seems to be rooted in empiricism. Is that an accurate statement?
Yeah, I think empiricism, reproducibility is the worst way of coming to know things, but it's better than everything else.
So you have made a qualitative assessment that that's the best way that we can come to this thing we call truth.
And I have a reason for that. And the reason why I think that is the best, and I could be wrong, but the reason why I think that's the best is because it seems like biases are a real problem.
Sure.
And it seems like the scientific method has been the best way to lower biases, because people of different religions, cultures, and biases on certain things get the same results, same answers, not on everything. And the scientific method does have its, especially when it's implemented, it has its flaws and problems. But it seems like there's certain things like gravity, 9.8 meters per second squared at sea level. Doesn't matter what you believe about God, people agree on that.
Are you saying that God and gravity are equal in that analogy?
No, I say gravity is...
In terms of being able to discern them, it seems like you're equating gravity with God.
No, I'm saying gravity is way better than God in terms of coming to knowledge.
Okay, so you've made a qualitative assessment about God in relation to how we understand him then.
Because the predictive models, it doesn't matter if you're a Hindu, Jew, Muslim, Christian, we can measure that But when it comes to God, you ask a Jew what God is, who God is, or a Christian or a Muslim or a Hindu, you'll get different answers. But when you ask about gravity, you get the same answer.
But we're still in the realm of comparing physical evidentiary empiricism to non-tangible reality, if it exists. So you've made this statement in so many ways, as I understand you, that the non-physical realm, you don't believe in it, and science trumps anything that may come from the non-physical realm. It's a qualitative statement about gravity and metaphysics.
But I even have things that would change my mind, Daniel. Like if I honestly think science can answer the questions of the God question, or even the metaphysical, what you're talking about. Because if you believe in a God that interacts with his creation,
yeah,
which I assume you do,
yes,
then any interaction with the natural world is now testable.
Of course. Yeah, I would agree.
So if let's say, Daniel, our brains are something other than material, and I don't know, 100 years from now, we can put 1,000 dead people. We can actually kill people and bring them back to life, like 99.99999% of the time.
Right.
Very little risk. No, not cryogenics, just you can actually kill a guy and bring him back to life at will.
Okay.
Like after weeks, we could do that. Let's say that technology comes to pass. And let's say I'm alive during this, and we put random number generators on top of wherever you can't be seen while the person's alive, but we say we're about to kill you, and then there's a random number generator on top there. I want you to, since you're non-physical, you can kind of go anywhere you want. I want you to tell me what the number is. And if all the people come back and give numbers, we can now test that and say, wow, now we have pretty good evidence that consciousness is something other than physical. And I would say, yes, my confidence is raised that.
Okay, so that raises your confidence in that raises Doug's confidence, but that doesn't tell me anything about whether or not there really is something above consciousness. That just says Doug's convinced now because of this science experiment. That doesn't really get to the heart of whether or not there still is something like that.
Well, it tells us that's not material, does it not?
Yeah, it does, but right now, in the questions that we're dealing with in real time, I guess if you want, that doesn't settle the question of the non-physical aspects of our being.
Yeah, it does, because you're dead and you can still do stuff.
No, I'm saying now that's a hypothetical scenario.
Oh, okay, yeah. So now, yeah, and so I agree. Right now, yeah, we don't have the technology to do that, so we can't answer it. But that could happen in the future.
Sure,
and that,
I would agree that that's a possibility. But in terms of now, assuming you have solidly rejected, and you're not saying it's not true. You have a low confidence in the existence of a deity.
But I'll give you a now test that we could run. So Daniel, I'm being very truthful with you right now as far as what would raise my confidence. And a lot of atheists won't admit this. They'll say, in fact, well, I won't mention that person. But if you, Daniel, were to be with me and a few of my friends and pray in the name of Jesus with, let's say, 10 amputees lined up, straight, who had their limbs blown off in Iraq. Jesus' name, limbs come back immediately. That would raise my confidence in your God.
Okay, I've heard that before. Can I offer this to you? Why doesn't limbs growing in utero work?
In utero? What do you mean?
In the development of a fetus, of a child in the womb.
Well,
limbs growing from a single cell not be impressive proof of a divine agency.
Because that's
if we're going to use limbs being blown off, why not limbs just being generated out of cells?
Because we can account for that naturally.
Yeah, we can account for that already. There's no God required there.
Okay, so the assumption is a naturalistic one, right? You're assuming that arms just, we know that it happens, but the explanation behind that is still metaphysical. You're cordoning off that cell development from any kind of divine explanation. You're assuming naturalism.
Well,
right?
Daniel, let's be really honest here. What is more amazing to you, the cell development in a uterus of limbs growing, or an amputee getting their limbs back immediately? Which one would you say wow more?
They're both wow to me.
Which one would you say wow more?
Well, I mean, I certainly would be impressed with the limb coming up, but when I look at a cell development growing into a human being, I'm equally stunned. But I think I would say honestly, Doug, since we're being honest, I would say honestly, they are both amazing to me. They both seem like miracles. They do. I mean, that's just Dan. Now, that doesn't prove anything. That's just me. I think something coming out of a single cell and having these is amazing to me. And if an amputee could grow his leg back, that would be equally amazing, especially if it happened right before my eyes. But I know limb regrowth. I don't know of any instance where somebody prays and the limb just comes back. But I do know of people being healed from cancer and things. And firsthand, I have had people pray for me and heal me of medical issues that I've had, a couple of them. And I've been spared miraculously through an appendicitis situation. I will spare the listeners of that story. But I think medically, the nascent development of human life is fundamentally mind-blowing. I do. I mean, that's Dan's personal approach to it.
Well, the reason why I would say wow to an amputee and not wow to a fetus growing in a uterus is because a fetus growing in a uterus happens, at least hundreds of thousands of times a day.
Sure.
But I don't think there's any record in history of someone being prayed for and a limb instantaneously growing back. So just based on that alone, just the rarity of it would make me go, wow.
Yeah, I mean, the resurrection was a wow, right?
So if you want to increase my confidence in your God, show me those types of rarities.
So you are positing here's the kind of evidence that would persuade me.
Yes.
Okay, but does the persuasive aspect of the evidence mean that it's all of a sudden true, or even in the absence of that?
Great question.
I mean, in the absence of that God could still be true. It's just a matter of satisfying your own evidentiary.
I value truth so much, Daniel, that I will not allow myself to be 100% confident or convinced.
Okay. All right.
Because I'm a human, fallible being.
Me too.
And I could be wrong.
Yeah.
So that's why I always prefer to view it in terms of confidence levels. You say in the name of Jesus, limbs come back, and they do, my confidence is raised. But will I say with 100% certainty that means X is true? No. But I think there's so many things in life that we believe without 100% certainty that I think, it's okay for me to do that.
So you value truth. I mean, we all do. Well,
no, some people don't.
I say we, at least we three. I mean, I'm establishing that. I don't take what you're saying lightly. So Doug, that you do, it sounds like you do believe in truth. Is that a lowercase or uppercase T?
I think I know what you mean by that, but
I assume you did.
If truth is necessarily defined by a God, then I don't believe in truth. But and that's how a lot of Christians define it.
Sure, but I'm not saying God's defining it. I'm saying, Doug, whether God defines it or not, you seem to accept the reality of truth.
My definition of truth is all those things learned by reliable methods that hopefully reflect reality, that should reflect reality. But there's so many things that we thought were true in the past that we said, oops, we're wrong. And so I think it takes a great deal of humility and honesty to say to oneself, even when they think they're right and something is true, that there could be things later shown to you to change your mind, and not just your mind, but the world's mind. It used to be true, I think, for almost everyone on the planet that the earth was flat. Boy, did we get that wrong. And there's still some people today who get that wrong.
Reed, you've been awfully quiet. Would you like to jump in? Doug and I have just kind of gone around and around. It's your show and you can't even say anything.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I'm a fan of Doug and his channel and his conversations.
But if you have something to say,
I can maybe take it in a different direction.
It's up to you. I want to respect your wishes there.
So you mentioned before you're 100% confident in this God's existence and Jesus. If for some reason you woke up tomorrow morning and your confidence was like very low, that you no longer believed in this God, how would you see yourself from today's perspective of you tomorrow? What would be missing in your life? How would you be like? Describe yourself from today's perspective of you tomorrow.
If I woke up with a low level of confidence,
yeah, not believing in it really at all.
I can tell you from experience exactly what that feels like. and what I'm going to tell you, Reed, to please, I know one of the taboos in street epistemology is when your interlocutor gets emotional on you. So please do not feel like you can't respond to what I'm going to say. I'm not trying to shut down the arguments with my motives. So I have struggled with depression all my life, even as a Christian. And so there are days, Reed, when I wake up and confidence level is zero. And not so much that God doesn't exist, but whether or not I'm a believer. And so so I guess it would be essentially the same thing in trying to live that out. But there are days, sometimes weeks, and there have been long periods of time in my 25 years as a believer, almost 25 years, where depression is so terrible that I don't feel loved or saved, or I don't feel like Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life, or I don't feel like reading the Bible today, or gosh, I just read Leviticus and like, do I really believe this? Right? Talking snakes and donkeys, and so through the black dog of melancholy and depression, it really, you don't want to go out of the house. It's meaning in life. It's very difficult to function. Very difficult to function intellectually without that kind of support mechanism. So you don't want to do anything. Everything that you like, you expressed, apathy, you wrestle with that a little bit. I have to, just kind of not being able to enjoy life, not feeling like you have a purpose, and all of that. It's very bleak. So that's the short end. But again, I'm not trying to get emotional on you, so you can't respond to me at all.
That's great. That's exactly what I was
no, it's terrible.
Daniel, our goal here is to get Reed to cry.
Okay, it's just you want to test the AI theory to see if he's got
I don't
emotions,
think he bleeds or cries. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, I might make him. I think I got a chuckle out of him a couple times, but does that count? Can we confirm humanity with his laugh?
So in terms of like this belief, letting you feel loved and having meaning and purpose in your life and being a supportive mechanism. Like for meaning and purpose, there are people who don't believe in these things, like maybe Doug and I.
Right.
And I think we have meaning and purpose in our lives. And I think a lot of people in the world can get meaning and purpose without this type of thing.
Let me stop you right there for just a second and tell you that I affirm the meaningful experiences of unbelievers. I like to use an example where, you're unbelievers. Does that mean the sun that rose on you this morning was not a real sun? Does that mean the food that you ate this morning for breakfast was not real food? The rain and the pleasure that you feel as being human, does that not count simply because you don't believe in God? Of course not. Now, where we would differ is that I think your meaning and purpose, whether I know you don't ascribe it ultimately to God, but I do think as a Christian that God in his common grace gives people all kinds of genuine experiences of peace and meaning and substance that are real and that are true. I would ascribe that to God's common grace. I know you would probably come up with a different reason for why you feel that, but I don't deny the reality of a non-believer's human experiences in terms of if they say they're really at peace, I believe them.
Totally, yeah.
I don't try to tear that down because I am not smart enough to know if God is really giving you some peace or if you're believing in a false peace. Ultimately, I think real true peace comes through Christ, but I do believe Jesus gives people peace. And I think so I'm saying that I do affirm the reality of atheists who say they find meaning and purpose and joy in life.
Yeah, totally. And I affirm as well, like believers getting meaning and joy as well. Like we have these feelings, and it's a great thing.
Yeah. We would obviously differ on the reasons of that, but I think you're experiencing what it means to be created in the image of God and are truly experiencing genuine, meaningful things. And that's part of, I think that's part of what drew me to Christianity was life 2.0, life more meaningful, life ultimately, here's where it's all coming from. And so I put all those pieces together. I don't know if you guys wanted to talk about the universe. I know I touted that I love to talk about that, but I don't want to take this in a direction against your wishes.
Yeah, like if you couldn't use any type of religious meaning for your life, what would be the second best thing?
Oh, I can tell you, having lived a life for 25 years without religion, it was music and relationships, girlfriends, and trying to achieve success and worldly success through my music. Establishing a career through which I could derive meaning and purpose and have a goal. And then when I became a Christian, my identity was no longer in what I did, but who I was as a child of God. So I can hold to different roles and things and not find my ultimate identity in what I'm doing. And that has been a very freeing concept, that I'm not bound to, well, I got to do this, or I got to do this, or I'm a teacher. And if I'm not a teacher, what am I going to do? It's like when Joe Paterno retired from Penn State, he died. I mean, he identified his life was football, and so I kind of, Christianity freed me from identity through what I do, rather than being identity through what I've been created to do by God. I think there's a difference. I don't know if that makes sense.
Being a child of God, like what does that mean to you? Like what type of values does that come with?
Well, I lost my father when I was 18. But this was 7 or 8 years after I became a Christian. So it wasn't my father's death that made me find Christ. I know people have said, oh, you're just looking for a father figure. Well, I needed one. And I really wasn't looking for one because I wasn't too happy with the one that I had. And so kind of running away from dad was what I was doing. And when God came into my life at 25, I started to make decisions based on what I thought he was telling me through his word and through prayer and through others' counsel and through church fellowship. I began to receive advice and counsel like I was receiving advice and counsel from a father. And I truly began to realize the love of the Father to me through his Son, and began to live in accordance with the standards that I believe he was sharing with me. Now, did I do it perfectly? No. Am I doing it perfectly now? No. I am still in the process. And as I told you the other night, I still love to learn and love to see what you guys are doing. I can learn from unbelievers. I can learn from non-Christians. And that's why part of what I love about this dialogue is that kind of discovery, making a new friendship, building relationships that I'm just not good at that. And so this is a journey, a step up in my faith, where I'm taking it more publicly and being more open about engaging people on a relational level. So it's a step of faith, and it's a continual step of faith in a relationship with my Heavenly Father through his Son. So that I feel like a child, even though I'm 48, I feel like I'm 5. And when I really pray and think about who God is, and he leads and guides me. So it's very personal, but of course, none of that personal stuff, I don't mean to use it as a means of saying, well, Christianity is true because it is my experience.
Daniel, I just want to let you know that my wife is a born again believer.
Oh, wow. That must be fun.
Yeah. And when we got married, of course, we were both believers because we were Bible-believing Christians, and we wouldn't get unequally yoked. So, but now we're in a situation where we are unequally yoked, and it's not her fault. I changed; she didn't. But what you were just talking about with Reed, I get it. I understand.
Yeah.
Like for my wife, her identity is in Christ. Mm-hmm. Her community is her fellow believers. She gets great comfort, peace, joy, fulfillment in life because of her faith, her belief. Mm-hmm. And so I totally understand it. And I've been on record as saying that I think atheists are freaks of nature. I think that a lot of atheists who can find, it seems like in the world, most people who derive peace, meaning, joy, all those good things, do so through a belief in the supernatural, the metaphysical, and so forth.
Yeah, it's
But
very comforting.
yeah, but there's a lot of atheists like me who we don't need that. We can find it in other areas in our life. And you mentioned a lot of great ones: music, relationships. Like one goal I have for myself is to become just a little bit better in something every day. And it's amazing how something as simple as that has brought me great joy and peace.
Oh yeah. And
Especially, yeah, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry, Doug. Go ahead and finish.
Well, I was just going to say, you know, especially as a father of 2 kids, you know, that's very fulfilling.
Yeah.
To try to become a better father each day.
Sure. And I think, I know we would disagree on the source of it, but I think that you are experiencing, to me, the joy of fatherhood that you experience is something like, I mean, that's the divine model. We are created in his image and therefore will be image bearers, as the tradition says, that in some way, I mean, we don't really know what does it mean to be created in the image of God, but certainly fatherhood is one of those things. And I think you genuinely experience what God does, taking pleasure in having relationships with his children. I know you don't affirm that, but I find that that is an attestation of God's common grace to even unbelievers. And I affirm that. I think your experiences are absolutely genuine and true. I know so many men who are so wonderful fathers and are so enriched by being dad. I have nieces and nephews, and that's the closest I come. But when they wrap themselves around me, I'm just like, you know, I'm a mess. I love their love. It's amazing. So, yeah, the relational aspect, I know it doesn't, the emotive, the comfort level doesn't mean that it's true. But it certainly is a very real aspect of what it means to be a believer, I think.
And you know what helped me is like and maybe it's a matter of personality type. I don't know. Like I've always been a stoic and very rational, even when I was a believer.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of Christians thought I wasn't a believer because of that.
Because you were so smart.
Yeah. Well, no, I didn't raise my hands in church, and
You're just
things like that.
contemplating it. Your mind was constantly.
I'm not an emotional guy. I'm not anything like Reed. Like he's just off the charts.
I'm impressed with his poker face. Yeah.
But
he's disappeared, by the way.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't know if it's a matter of are believers ones who have a certain personality type versus, you know, if you have a personality type like mine. But one thing that really helped me when I left the belief system, it felt like a burden had been lifted, in the sense that, and I'm not asking you to admit to anything, but there were things in my life when I was a believer where I just really was bothered by, you know, things in the Bible, things about my belief in general. It really bothered me. Sure. And it seemed like the apologetic excuses just didn't work well, but I chalked it up to a mystery, right? I don't know everything. I'm just a human. So who am I as the clay pot to yell at the potter?
Sure.
And so that's the stance I took. But when I left the Christianity, it's like I didn't have to fight anymore. I didn't have to kind of have that friction in my brain. Like I didn't have to have the gears grinding. It was like I could be open enough to say I don't know, and be honest with myself and say I don't believe.
So for you, Doug, the friction, I guess you call it cognitive dissonance. You want to?
Yeah.
Okay. So that disappeared for you.
Not entirely. Like I think every human being has cognitive dissonances in their life.
I was going to say, there must still be cognitive dissonance with you on different levels now. It's just different, right? It's just shifted.
No, and to be honest, I can't think of one off the top of my head that I still have today. Maybe some quantum theory stuff kind of freaks me out, but and it's the reason why I don't have that cognitive dissonance anymore, or at least very, very little, is because I actually feel I'm more honest now, where I can say, you know what? I don't know. And I'm okay with not knowing. I'm okay with not having this sense of security and certainty. I'm okay with just living my life and saying, maybe someday I'll figure this out. But until then, I will plead ignorance and I will say, I don't know. But one thing I value greatly, Reed was asking about values. One thing I value is I don't like being duped. I really don't like it. I don't like being.
You're lying just hacks you.
Yeah, I do not like people fooling me.
Yeah.
And so when I was a believer and I started looking at what I actually believed, and am I being fooled here? Just because I thought the Muslims are being fooled, like they're genuine, they're sincere, but ultimately they've been dealt a lie, and they bought it hook, line, and sinker. Am I that person? And so I started viewing myself in the third person, and I thought, you know what? If God is real, if He's out there, He doesn't mind me asking these questions. If He's real, He's okay with me doubting. But I took it a step further, and I said, I'm going to doubt the core propositions. Maybe this God doesn't exist. Maybe just because the Bible says something doesn't make it true. And so, I took a huge risk there as far as, coming out of belief. I still believe in those concepts of hell and stuff. So it was very scary.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that the lack of cognitive dissonance would make something more plausible or true? Because is that. You're not saying that claim. You're not.
No. I'm just saying. I'm giving you.
You're just saying that the cognitive dissonance with which you wrestled as a Christian dissipated because you no longer wrestled with the tenets of Christianity.
Yeah,
but you're not saying that the absence of cognitive dissonance makes something more likely to be true.
Yeah, you're correct. I'm not. Okay. I'm not making a truth claim here. But what I'm saying though is, in my life, there was like a trade-off.
Oh, I understand the tension you're talking about.
Yeah,
I do.
On one hand, I had this sense of I'm a child of God. I got peace. I got love. I got protection. I got security. I got
right.
But on the other hand, I got these. You know what? This thing in the Bible, I just don't buy it.
Sure.
And so it was like a trade-off. But now that I'm not a believer, it's like I don't need that trade-off anymore.
So when you say, for clarification's sake, when you say you just don't buy it, is this just Doug being incredulous?
It's my confidence is low enough that I don't believe it. When I say it, that's what I mean when I say don't.
But that's not any way to assess whether or not what you don't believe is true or not, correct?
Correct. Yeah. Okay. And I know you've asked that question about 10 times already tonight.
I know. I'm just trying to clarify. I'm just because it comes around where I hear you say I don't believe it, and I'm just trying to keep in balance. You're saying you don't believe it, not that you're saying it's not true.
Yeah. And if there's one thing that I personally hope you take away from this conversation is that by someone saying they don't believe something doesn't necessarily they're saying that it can't be true.
I understand. I do understand.
And I think that's a very, very common mistake that a lot of people make.
So your unbelief is based on evidence or lack thereof. In other words, you have a set of criteria that this doesn't match and you've rejected it on those grounds.
Yes.
Being personally satisfied of not having personal satisfaction at the evidence.
Yeah, it comes down to, and I think Reed takes this position as well, and he can tell me if I'm wrong, but that when you have an extraordinary claim that the evidence should match it, and if it doesn't, then we're kind of left asking ourselves, what claims are we going to believe?
So when you say, I know that comes from Carl Sagan, the extraordinary claim, the invisible dragon in the garage.
Right. I've used that a lot.
Yeah. I've always wondered about this, and you're the first one that I've really kind of talked to about it face to face. Yeah, I get it. You probably know this, but his son, Nick, his eldest son from his first marriage, wrote a blog post about Dad's Porsche. And he describes the Porsche having the license plate Phobos, which is the god of fear, which is one of the moons of Mars. And Nick says, rather mysteriously, we don't know why Dad had that license plate. And I just make that connection to the invisible dragon in the garage, and I go, because that argument is wielded. It has been wielded against me in a kind of, not that you're doing this, Doug, but it has been wielded against me as a kind of intimidating evidence. Sagan wasn't outrightly condemning religious belief in that scenario, but who couldn't equate the invisible dragon to a deity, right? I mean, that's the connection
Well,
a lot of people make. So my point is, when you come down to the extraordinary aspect of it, that seems to be a very subjective thing that empirical science cannot finally establish. So what constitutes criteria for extraordinary? This is not a scientific question. This is a matter of adjectival predilection for, is this extraordinary or not? Like going to the moon was extraordinary. A photograph of Armstrong walking around the lunar dust is a photograph. That's not extraordinary by evidentiary means. That's a normal means.
Instead
go
of
ahead.
yeah, instead of looking at it in absolute terms, let's view it in relative terms. The word extraordinary. So let's say I told you that I owned a car. Would you consider that an extraordinary claim?
It depends on your financial situation, or if you're 5, or
I got money in the bank. Okay.
Yeah. Or you know, if you're a child or something, there is context. If you have a car and you have no, you know, so contextually, if you're a 7-year-old child and you have a car, I would be surprised.
As a 46-year-old professional male who has
no, it's not extraordinary.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, if I told you, so we're setting a bar now. Doug has a car.
But our definition of extraordinary is still subjective. We're still determining a subjective sense.
What I'm trying to do now is just rank levels of extraordinary. So I'm not talking about absolute levels. I agree with you that extraordinary could be absolutely different levels.
Subjective.
So, but I want to see if we agree on what's the ranking.
I know
So we got Doug has a car, not that extraordinary. What if I told you that I'm making a claim now, I own a nuclear missile?
Well, I would doubt it, but it wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility.
Right. You doubt it, but it wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility.
Right.
And
it's
would you agree? Would you agree it's a little more of an extraordinary claim than me owning a car?
Yeah. So I see what you're doing in establishing the degrees of extraordinary, but that you and I would agree on something doesn't establish that, like, that hammer is red. It just says Dan and Doug agree that this is here. It doesn't, we can't see it like a beach ball or a coffee pot.
Okay, but let me take it one step further now, because I'm going to put two things together here. The ranking of extraordinary. Now, lastly, if I told you I had an interstellar spaceship that can travel back in time.
Well, given what Elon Musk has achieved, I would say, hey, Doug's a savvy guy. He's an atheist. Maybe he's got some money in the bank and knows the guy that owns Amazon.
Well,
possibly.
But I think we would agree on the ranking of.
I would actually say that last one would not be. It would be surprising, but in this day and age of competitive space race, I would say, hey, maybe Doug's got something he's just not told anybody.
But it's more extraordinary. It's more extraordinary than a nuclear missile, because there's thousands of nuclear missiles on this planet, and yet there's no interstellar space time traveling. I would
invert those two. I would say your nuclear missile would be more extraordinary than a spaceship. That's where I would say, wow, how did you get a missile? Because that's not available. And maybe they're equal. Maybe having a rocket ship would be, you said rocket ship, right?
Yeah, an interstellar, going from star to star.
Oh, interstellar. Excuse me, I skipped right over that important.
Yeah, I was wondering, am I hearing you right? You think?
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. I thought you just meant plain old Elon Musk, NASA space shuttle quality kind of thing. Sorry.
So the reason why I'm saying all this is because if we agree on those rankings, from car to nuclear missile to interstellar spaceship, then I think the evidence goes with it. If I said I had a car, that's not that big of a claim. And let's say you doubted me for some reason because you thought I was broke. And then I actually took the video camera out and showed you the car, and that's good enough. Okay, I believe you now, Doug.
Yeah, sure.
You might doubt more, but you'd probably be satisfied with that.
Yep.
Now, nuclear missile, my guess is you'd want more.
Well, you just have to show me the missile. Not extraordinary.
Okay, but how would you know it's a nuclear missile if I just showed you with my camera?
Again, we'd just do some empirical sleuthing, but we could show that, okay, that's a missile, and I own it.
Do you agree that the level of evidence would go up?
No, it's just a missile, just like it's a car. Those things exist.
If Doug wasn't in like the picture or the evidence of him right next to it, would you still be just as confident that it's his missile?
Well, that it would be his, no.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
There would be what would corroborate this would be some documentation from South Korea or North Korea that you bought this used at a garage sales in Pyongyang or something like that, you know. But if the piece of paper documenting your ownership and the picture of the missile and you standing next to it, shaking the hand of a North Korean, all of that is normal. A photograph, a picture, the actual missile, a documentation, that's all normal stuff.
My question to you, Daniel, and please, I want you to answer as honestly as you can.
I will.
Would you require the same amount of evidence for those two claims? I own a car and I own a nuclear missile. Would you have the same level of...
It would just depend on what I'm trying to get out of you, Doug. If you want to say, I would not put any stock in the car unless it perhaps had some bearing on what you and I would be doing in future interactions. The missile claim, it's just, it would depend on whether or not we're entering. If you're selling me the missile or the car, then I'm going to be vested in that. And I would want to see those things.
So am I hearing you right that you would believe me if I said I had a car and I said I had a nuclear missile, and if I gave you a photograph of a car, if that sufficed for you for the car, it would also suffice for you with the nuclear missile?
In terms of, you said with the car that this is you, this is a picture of you with the car. And I think it would suffice for me. Okay, I have no stake in this claim. Doug says that's his car, that's his car. How is this affecting me? It doesn't seem to be at all. Unless you're selling me the car. Dan, I've got this car, here it is. I would need title and more than just a photograph. So we're getting into the same thing. I own a missile, I own a car, I want to sell them to you. Now I'm personally invested in the kind of evidence you're offering. But it still would not be extraordinary evidence because documentation, photographs, missiles, and cars are all common things.
It's just greater evidence.
Yeah, that's right.
I would think the documentation of ownership on either object is normal. It's like it's normal. It's just registered to Doug.
Owning a nuclear missile is normal?
Well, you just said there were thousands of them, and it wouldn't be incredibly out of the realm of possibility that you could.
For me, an individual citizen, that would be normal?
Okay, but no, it wouldn't be. But the documentation demonstrating that you own it would be normal. A certificate from a government.
That's not what we're talking about.
Oh, we're talking about the idea of evidence being extraordinary, and I'm just saying that the evidence would be normal.
We're talking about the idea of evidence matching the level of evidence matching the level of the claim.
But the level of evidence would be the same. It would be a certificate of ownership. It's a piece of paper.
Yeah, Daniel, I sense you know where I'm going with this, and you're pushing back hard.
Yeah, I do. I've had this argument with a few people online, but not in person. But we haven't gone to the extent that I think we're going. But the evidence to me, the idea of it being extraordinary is a subjective assessment made by the individual, not scientific.
Can you repeat back to me what the purpose of my question is?
To determine whether or not we agree on levels of extraordinary.
Rankings, right?
Rankings, yes. And so you and I can agree that you claiming that you own a missile is unusual. But the proof that would demonstrate that would be ordinary. It would be documentation that we would rely upon. Government authorized documentation of some kind that showed a transaction between you and the previous owner. That's normal.
Yeah,
I think that's where we disagree, because you would show me a piece of paper, you would show me the photograph.
I actually think you're being disingenuous right now, and I hate to say it, because I think in your life, you live your life exactly the way I'm describing it. When you hear a claim and it's sort of bizarre to you, and I think you would doubt it more and require more evidence before you believe it, compared to a different claim that you don't find bizarre. I think that's fair to say?
No, because I agree with you that if you were to say you owned a missile, I would be instantly curious. But if I have nothing vested in it, Doug, I'm not going to press you for
Okay,
evidence.
let's use the word curious. Would you be more curious about the nuclear missile than the car?
Not really, because at that level, you've kind of subjected yourself to a level of something that's not normal. But if I don't have any vested interest in it, your missile claim is likely to end the conversation. Okay, Doug, you own it.
How does the vested interestness of it relate to the extraordinariness of it?
Well, I was saying earlier, if he wanted to sell me these things, then I would have a vested interest in it. If I was like some underground guy buying nuclear arms from him, I would want to see that he has these in his possession. And he would show me by very ordinary means that he owned them.
Could someone be apathetic about the object of a claim
Yes.
and still be highly doubtful of a claim?
But we're getting into the qualitative assessment of extraordinary evidence. And I'm just pushing back saying that Doug showing me he owns a missile would be done through photography, written documentation, bill of sale, and the actual thing in his backyard or silo or whatever it is. Those are ordinary things. And that's all I'm saying.
I know we're probably talking in circles here, but I'm going to give it one last try.
Sure.
What type of evidence, if I made a claim that I have an interstellar spacecraft, what evidence would you need to believe me?
I really wouldn't pursue the question.
Is that an honest answer?
I mean, that's as honest. If somebody said that to me, I would be skeptical, and I really wouldn't pursue it. I mean, honestly, I wouldn't require evidence from you, unless you wanted to try to sell it to me. You were trying to beat Elon Musk at his own game, and you wanted to get into space investments, and you had this thing, and you wanted $1 billion from me so I can invest in your company. Then I'm going to demand that you show me this thing. But showing me this thing,
if you could go on a ride on it, wouldn't you
sure.
want to make sure it's real?
Absolutely.
If Doug is offering a ride.
Yeah, if he's offering me a ride, I'll go. Absolutely. But it ends up being a physical thing. Okay, I see it with my own two eyes. It's a metal box, or it's a transport, or it's something, and here's the certificate, and here's the technology. Get in, let's go. Those are all very common, ordinary things that we do as human beings. So again, the evidence is not extraordinary, it's normal. Now, the time machine itself is extraordinary. The evidence that you would show me that it's real would be ordinary. Here's the thing.
I'm asking you for the level of evidence, the amount of evidence, like the types of evidences. So I'm not equating extraordinary evidence with the extraordinary claim in that way. What I'm saying is, with the car, you might be satisfied with a picture. You might not, but most people would say, you know what? I don't even need a picture. I believe you, Doug. But with the interstellar spacecraft, and I'd probably get laughed at if I made that claim. And then I looked them straight in the eyes, and I'm not joking, guys. I actually have a craft that can go from star to star. And to do that, that has to be basically warp speed, faster than the speed of light. So I'm not joking. I'm making that claim. Are you just going to sit there and say, I don't care, and walk away?
Well, tell me why I should be interested in that. Why should I pursue your claim?
So why would you pursue my claim?
Well, I mean, you would tell me this, okay. What impact is this going to have on me that I should pursue it and demand evidence?
Because you value truth, and let's say
Sure.
I say that it is true. I own an interstellar spacecraft, and you value truth, and you value knowledge. And what if Doug is telling the truth? Don't you value truth? That would be pretty cool, right? Yeah.
And I'm sure Doug wanting to show the world his invention at some point, I will see it.
This is a new discovery.
Yeah, this is great. I won't tell anybody. I will wait and see what happens. And congratulations on going to Antares in a heartbeat or something like that. So to me, again, the evidence would come forth. Here is your transport. It makes it on MSN.
Okay, what if the evidence did came forth, but it was just a picture on Fox News?
Okay.
Would you be a believer?
I certainly have no reason to doubt, but again, we're filtering it through a source. Huh?
No reason to doubt a picture?
I just say no reason, but I would have my level of confidence in what Doug is saying would be elevated. Oh, the guy really was telling me the truth. How about that? Or at least it seems that he was.
How confident would you be on that scale from 0 to 100?
After I saw something on Fox?
Yeah, just a picture on Fox.
Media, maybe not, given all the.
Okay, now let's say not only was there a picture on Fox News of my interstellar spacecraft, but experts from all around the world testified about they were in it and they saw it running, but they didn't go out in space, but it actually works. They looked at the mechanics of it and the physics of it. Would that increase your confidence or lower it?
Sure. I mean, I would be impressed, but ultimately,
Exactly. Okay,
yeah,
now
but
we're getting somewhere. We're adding evidence, and your confidence increases.
I'm not sure what my confidence has to do with the reality of your invention, though.
Because you're seeing new evidences, you're seeing
Oh.
different types of evidence. First was a picture on Fox News, but now it's expert testimony. And let's say now the third, and you got a new piece of evidence coming, and let's say it's you actually they fly you out for you personally to look at it and enter it. And then the fourth evidence comes by that you actually get to write in it.
Well, I think we're back to comparing physical to metaphysical and the evidence for intellectual constructs versus the evidence of physical things. And I think the two have been conflated in our discussion.
Daniel, I'm not even going to push back on that at all. I want you to understand me, and maybe Reed, if he agrees with what I'm saying here. I want to be loved by you, Daniel.
I love you. I enjoy it. I know.
But a guy like me, I'm trying to explain why when the book says that a man rose from the dead, why I don't immediately believe it, or why I don't immediately have confidence that it's true. And it's the same reason as the car in that interstellar spaceship. If the Gospel of Mark said that Jesus Christ had a pet cat named Sasha, okay, maybe that's true. That's fine. But if the Gospel of John says he rose from the dead and is God, now to me that is like the interstellar spaceship, whereas the cat named Sasha is like the car. And so I would need more evidence to justify, for me, I just want you to understand me. I'm not asking you to accept this, but this is where I'm coming from.
Yeah, I understand that it's Doug's personal evidentiary criteria or requirement. I'm not going to believe until you can increase my confidence level according to the standards that I'm asking for.
And the reason I do that is because I value truth. I do not want to be duped. I want to believe true things. And so I hope you can understand that it's not just because I'm obstinate and stubborn and I refuse to believe in miracles and because I'm angry at God.
Doug, I've not made any of those.
Yeah, I know. I understand that, and I thank you for not. But I say that because I want you to know and understand where I'm coming from.
I do. And
this is why I don't believe.
Yeah, no, it's incredulous to you. It's like the interstellar spaceship. Can I ask you a question in relation to that, though?
Sure, go ahead.
Can I explain where I'm coming from with that?
Absolutely, Reed. Yes,
Yeah.
This is, I keep forgetting it's your show.
Sorry.
That's all right.
And what we're trying to get at here is like this value of proportioning our beliefs to the evidence. This value, like we hold this value because we want to believe as many true things as possible, but also as few false things as possible. And the reason we want to believe as few false things is not just because truth is some intrinsic quality, even though, just believing in true things is good, I think, but also that false beliefs are not useful if we want to solve problems in reality. And false beliefs can be dangerous. I think that's where I'm coming from.
Okay. In regard to that, Reed, there's a couple of things I think the knot we're trying to untie is the epistemic justification for evidence. What constitutes acceptable evidence for divine existence? And that's where I think skeptics are tacitly making a theological claim. By rejecting the theism that's on the table, they are implicitly saying we would essentially know what God would look like if he existed. So how does a skeptic establish theological criteria for the existence of a belief or the existence of God? That's one thing. And the other thing is, you've said a few times, the false beliefs implies that you know what a true belief would be. And that's the other criteria that I think we're trying to hit on. And I don't know that skepticism has good answers for those things. That especially the first one of how do we establish evidentiary criteria for a theological claim from a skeptical point of view. In a sense, I just see skepticism doing theology.
Well, Daniel, if I can butt in here, it's more
Sure.
than just a theological claim. This is a physical claim of a physical man rising from the dead. That's a physical claim.
Yes, so we're getting back to this question of evidence. What constitutes acceptable evidence for that as well, from the point of skepticism?
Right. And go ahead.
Evidence for us, evidence is couched in empiricism.
Right. I understand that. But when we're going 2,000 years in the past, how do you determine empirically whether or not something happened?
For those types of things,
For that,
empiricism fails, so we should doubt it.
But then you throw history out the window. If you approach history from a purely empirical standpoint, you can't do history. You can't recreate Spartan. You can't recreate the ancient world in a systematic empirical way. I mean, you have archaeology, you have potsherds and pieces of text, and you have ruins of buildings, but this doesn't tell you what happened in and among those buildings and ruins and pottery. And so if we're going to be true to empiricism, we have really no access to history at all.
No access.
And very little. I mean, you have the empirical physical things, but in terms of what people did in and around ancient times, how do you determine the truth of what happened in ancient times in and among people that no longer exist?
This is a historian question that I'm hearing you at.
Yes, it is.
And one of the things historians use to figure out what probably happened in the past is independent sources.
Sure. But if we're being empirical, how do those claims from antiquity gain merit in the 21st century as actually having happened?
By having having independent sources.
So Caesar crossing the Rubicon.
Yes, having independent sources.
What are the sources of those?
Archaeology of elephant bones.
Of elephant bones, meaning Hannibal crossing the Alps? Is that what you?
I'm not sure, but if we found out archaeology that depicted the characters in that account, that would raise our confidence that the characters in that account.
So do you agree in the archaeological reality of Jerusalem and Galilee and Assyria and Egypt and the Herods that history attests ruled over Palestine in the time of Christ? Do you agree
Yes.
So does that lend? How do you determine that Herod was real?
I'm not too.
I mean, how do you determine that any historical figure is real? I mean, Doug has said multiple separate attestations, but how do we determine how many separate attestations get a historical nod to the truth? This is so unpacking history seems to be.
Yeah, usually historians say that 1, your confidence would be very low. 2, it's higher. 3 or more, we're starting to get to something where we can have higher confidence on. And so there's other criteria like criteria from embarrassment and so forth. Now, I'm not a historian, so please don't.
Neither am I. No, Doug, that's okay.
I don't want to. Yeah, I don't want to speak out of my butt here, but
that's okay. That's right.
But there are reasons why historians around the world, whether they're Jews, Christians, Muslims, Hindus, believe Caesar existed. And there's reasons why and did the things he did. Mm-hmm. And there's reasons why historians disagree on Jesus.
Did Mark Antony have an affair with Cleopatra?
I don't know.
Yeah.
But this is why, but Daniel, this is why we spent, 30 minutes on the ranking of the claim and ranking of the evidence.
Yeah, it seems
because people have affairs all the time.
Sure.
But people don't rise from the dead all the time.
No, but again, the likelihood seems to be subjective to the individual making the assessment.
Let's talk about the likelihood for you, Daniel. Is it more likely to you that someone rose from the dead, or that a book just says it happened and maybe it didn't?
It is likely to me that Jesus rose from the dead, but my assessment is biased, Doug. It's biased like yours is biased in the other direction. It seems unlikely to you. And so we are epistemically on opposite ends of the seesaw. And how do we balance it? How do we come to that center point? And so to me, it seems like the skeptic takes the same epistemic sort of investment in faith in what he cannot see. It just seems unlikely to him, but that unlikelihood does not is not a defeater for the resurrection.
Can I ask you this question? What do you think is more? What is more likely to you personally? That Jesus rose from the dead, or that when I let go of this pen, it will fall to the ground?
And in my eyes, in my personal Christian bias, they're both equally likely.
Wow. Okay.
But I could turn it around and say, Doug, what's more likely, this pen falling or Jesus not rising from the dead?
What is more likely?
So what I'm saying is, what I'm saying, I'm sorry, double negative. Let me adjust that. Jesus, you're going to tell me that this pen's going to fall. That's a lot more likely than Jesus ever having rose from the dead, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
But again, that still gets into the subjectivity of the individual determining likelihood for his or herself.
Why can we justify that?
Or how can you? How can you?
How can we justify that?
Yeah, that for the epistemologist who does not believe in the resurrection, how do they justify that likelihood?
Is it pure personal whim?
No, I don't think so. But the foundation for justifying that lack of a belief or that unbelief, there's still a necessity for justifying that, I think. If you're going to hold the Christian epistemically accountable for his belief in the resurrection, I think it's equally fair to ask the skeptic to justify his unbelief in the resurrection. How do you do that? You know how I do it. I do it by faith. But how does the secular epistemologist justify the unlikelihood of the resurrection?
Because it doesn't happen every day?
There's a lot of things that don't happen every day, you know.
Yeah, and I doubt those too.
Yeah, but again, Doug, we're back to the subjectivity of the individual with his bias. I don't see it happen, therefore it's unlikely, or I just don't see this happen. I mean, to the people that were attested to be in and around the time of Jesus's crucifixion and resurrection would certainly disagree with you. How do we know they're wrong? From the perspective of, go ahead, Reed. Go ahead.
The likelihood of events is empirical, based on statistics and.
Okay, so something is statistically unlikely. Does that make the truth of is that a defeater for the claim?
It could be the case that an actual human being rose from the dead.
Yeah.
2,000 years ago.
Right.
The reasons given for that claim are not extraordinary reasons. They're not extraordinary evidence.
Okay, so that is according to you and your secular bias, right? Would you admit?
And historians from all around the world.
But you said earlier that there are secularists who don't agree, scholarly wise, and there are Christians who agree on that. So that seems to be a bias for secular interpretations of the gospel narrative.
All secular historians are agnostic about that whether or not Jesus actually rose from the dead.
Does that make the resurrection likely or unlikely?
Every time you ask that, my question is going to say no.
No to what? It does not make it likely? I don't mean to be frustrated. I'm just trying to clarify. Does the secular consensus on Jesus's resurrection make the resurrection unlikely?
Unlikely or false?
Well, let's start with unlikely, since that's what we're talking about, probability and unlikelihood. Does a secular consensus mean something is unlikely?
Yeah, because the job of a historian, a secular or any historian, is to figure out what probably happened in the past. And by likely or not likely is by definition what probably happened in the past. So historians do not say that it's likely that Jesus rose from the dead. Only Christian fundamental historians do.
But does a scholarly consensus on the likelihood of that resurrection, but it's biased toward a secular interpretation of the Gospels?
Okay, now, great. I love that you brought up bias. So you admitted bias, I admit bias, and you asked a great question earlier. How do we lower our biases and figure out what's true? Because we value truth.
Yep.
What is a really good indicator for me personally is when I see people of different biases, different cultures, different areas of the world coming to the same conclusion. Then I say, hey, we've almost kind of controlled for bias now because they were raised differently. They're from different parts of the world. They're not talking to each other. They're not colluding. And they looked at the same evidences and they've come to the same conclusion. And so I build my confidence up from that.
Could you say global Christianity is exactly what you just described?
No, not even close. Even among Christians, they don't agree on stuff.
No, the central core tenets of Jesus' resurrection. Is
Even
what
the core
believe-
tenets, I've met Christians who don't even, they believe in the resurrection of Jesus, but not that he was divine. Like, I tell you,
that disagreement does not a defeater for the actual claim itself.
every time you say that, I'm going to say, no, I agree. I mean,
Okay.
we're talking about confidence levels, how sure we can be about something is actually true.
That's a personal predilection. That's not an objective reality. That's what I've been getting at. You've admitted, you've said that this is just my standard. I'm not satisfied with the evidence, therefore I don't believe. But it's not objectively established that that is the case, that it's not true.
All I'm saying is, when I see just Christian historians say that Jesus rose from the dead, that is a historical fact. And all the non-Christian historians are agnostic about it at best. To me, that's reason to doubt. And what I just told you is true. This is what historians say who are not Christian. They say, we have no way of knowing that this likely happened, that this actually happened in the past.
But that claim of we have no way of knowing is not in accordance with what actually happened. They're making a 21st century claim. It's very anachronistic to say that we can't know. How do you know we can't know? I think that's a bias right there. That's a cognitive bias, that we can't know something. That kind of shuts down the exploration. Well, if we can't know, why would I bother even looking into the claims of truth to begin with? That seems to me the fundamentalist defeater that's leveled at Christians for saying God did it. Therefore, that shuts the door on science, because we don't need to explore anymore because God did it. But if a secular scholar says this is not worth investigating, what do? Just stop and don't even bother looking at it?
Daniel, they spend their lives investigating this.
I know,
their profession, their career.
To come to the conclusion that we cannot know is a cognitive bias that precludes.
No, sorry. They would say they're agnostic about it. They don't know.
Yeah, but usually hard agnosticism says we cannot know. A lot of people do say that. And I'm just saying that is not a defeater for the truth claims that are in the Christian faith. That's just a bias of an intellectual scholar who is not a believer. And I could say that the bias argument works in both ways. Everything you've leveled against Christianity through secular scholarship can be pushed back in the same direction in terms of epistemologically. This is a secular bias that is making this determination based on their own presuppositions of
Daniel, can you repeat back to me what I said to that secular bias comment? What was my response to that?
That it makes it more likely that Christianity is not true.
No.
Or that it makes it harder to believe or less likely to be true.
No, you're saying that secular historians are biased
toward secularism, toward a secular interpretation of the Christian scriptures. Yeah.
And what was my response to that?
You said no. You said, well,
but what was my reason?
It's you keep coming back to, this is what I believe. This is what's likely.
No. See, I don't think you were listening to me. I
okay,
said,
I'm sorry. I will hush and I'll let you say.
The reason why is because we have historians of different biases, different cultures, different places they live, but they're not Christian. But they're other beliefs, other, worldviews, backgrounds. And yet they come to the same conclusion as a professional historian, that we cannot say that they're agnostic. They just say, I don't know. We cannot say that this is a historical fact because we don't know.
Well,
that is why I say that when you say, well, those are just secular historians and they're biased, Doug. Well, okay, but doesn't the fact that they come from different areas of the world and they're not colluding, it's not like they're trying to bash Christianity. They're honest people, they're sincere people, they're doing their jobs, and they've looked at the same evidence as Christian historians, and they've concluded something else. That's why I say that maybe that is evidence that their biases have been suppressed, because they all have biases, but they're different.
But their fundamental bias is agnostic atheism.
No, some of them are Jews. Yeah. Have you seen a Jewish
person would be, I wouldn't say that their bias would be secular. They would be Judaically biased.
Right. So they have it. And so Jews who have their Judaic bias don't believe that Jesus rose from the dead, or don't say historically that they could say that it's a historical fact. Secular historians, Hindu historians, I don't know how many Hindus study Christianity, but I'm sure there's at least one or two. Chinese historians, whatever, they all look at the evidence and they have concluded as a team differently than just the Christian historians.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, doesn't that sound like, okay, we got different biases, but they're coming to the same conclusion that, hey, maybe we're onto something that's pretty reliable because the biases have been removed or have been kind of controlled for.
I think I would agree with you, and the variety, the multiplicity of cultural backgrounds does add something to the argument, but you could still argue that primarily they are presuppositionally anti-Christian in their bias. Not that they're openly atheist, and when I say anti-Christian, I just mean that they're predisposed not to believe in something like the resurrection. Mike Licona gets into that into his the historiographical look at the resurrection. He talks about the historian's bias. And
but do you see how that kind of... that's a huge claim you're making right now.
Well, so is yours. I'm just saying that the biases are not completely removed. Culturally, there may be some, but if I were to argue Christianity just the way you've argued for the secular historians, you would not let me slide on that one. If I were to say all these different Christians from different backgrounds have come from Russia and from South Korea and from Japan and from Fiji and Florida and Sacramento and Vancouver have all come together, they haven't colluded, they haven't talked to each other, they've all independently examined.
Are they from different religions?
And maybe some of them have, and they have come to Christianity through their study of the Gospels, and they have concluded that the Gospels are true. You wouldn't give that a pass, is what I'm saying. You would argue that there would be a bias there that would make their conclusion unreliable.
Yeah, I see your point. Of, let's say they were Muslim and they became a Christian because of their study. I get that point. Yeah, I don't deny that. But it seems to me that those biases have been at least controlled for because they're of different religions, whereas Christian historians are Christian. And they're studying something that's Christian.
Yeah, Mike Licona describes how hard that process was to be objective in his research for his book. And so admittedly, I think what we're both coming to, and I think we would both agree, it's very difficult to account for and to control for bias when you're studying the past. What
would increase your confidence?
In the resurrection not being true?
No, that it is true. I know you believe already it's true, but what would even make you even more confident that it's true?
I think I can actually give you an example of this. Several years ago, I stumbled across the story of how the Koine Greek was actually discovered. I think you probably know, being in the faith for 30 years, that for a long time, evangelicals thought the Koine Greek was some kind of magical, divinely breathed, special Greek. But then they found the ash piles and ash heaps in this little Egyptian Christian community of scraps of paper like laundry lists and letters and business transactions, all written in Koine Greek. And I forgot the name of the town, but there's a good little book on the subject. And they found the Koine Greek. Whereas before, this was a contention among secular scholars that the Christian scriptures were not true. There's no historical evidence of the kind of Greek used in the New Testament. And then bang, you have this stuff found in Egyptian dumps in this small little town. This language does exist, and it was the language of commerce and everyday goings on in that little community, and thus Koine Greek has historical relevance. So that was a boost actually to me in regards to that. I learned language. I took Greek and Hebrew a couple of years ago, and I learned through that course about the I wish I could name it.
And before you took that course, and if I would have asked you how confident are you that what you believe is true, would you have said 100%?
I think I still would have, yeah. And I know that probably sounds prideful, but I mean, that's just my confidence level, and I'm not unopposed to hearing the best arguments against what I believe. It's not like a shutdown. I got my fingers in my ears. I believe this is true, and I'll defend it. And sometimes I don't do it very charitably, and I'm sorry.
Okay, so now what would lower your confidence? You give me an example of what raised it. What would lower it?
Well, I've tried to lower it, Doug. My last 3 or 4 years, I have been knee deep in atheistic tomes and atheistic arguments, and have read Hitchens and Dawkins, and I have really tried to, as an adult, coming around to my 25th year of believing, I have really subjected it to the scrutiny of the best arguments that are out there, and I'm still here. That doesn't mean that Christianity is true, but I have engaged in as much as lowering my confidence level. And I'll tell you, one time about 2 years ago, I was reading in Christopher Hitchens's book, The Portable Atheist. There was an argument, a moral argument against Christianity, and I was tired and I was frustrated, and I had to write an essay that I didn't want to write. And the argument made a lot of emotional sense to me. And I told my professor, I said, emotionally, I understand where this woman is coming from, and I see why atheism is attractive to people. The way she wrote it, it was very excoriating, very well professionally written, but it was very persuasive on an emotional level. But my professor walked me through, and I got through that. But I will tell you that I really have, and maybe I haven't done it sufficiently, and I'm not done doing it, because here I am engaging you and Reed, and I want to keep doing this because it's folks like you that keep me on my toes. And I told Reed at the outset before we went live, last night, I said, I appreciate and I do learn from and have learned from and have sharpened my response because of what Anthony does and what Reed's doing and that kind of aspect. I read Boghossian's book. I wanted to sharpen my wits against that and see, well, what would I say? So I appreciate the pushback from people who don't think like me. And I continue to progress along that intellectual journey. Hopefully doing it charitably, because one of the worst things you could be is a jerk apologist, and I feel like sometimes I am. So dialogues like these help me to curb my, what's the Corinthians? You can explain all mysteries, but if I have not love, I am a clanging cymbal. And sometimes I think I'm guilty of that. So these kind of conversations have to help me work that out. And so I appreciate what you guys do in that regard.
Well, yeah, and I just wanted to say that I believe doubt's a virtue, because when I see someone being very certain about something, so highly confident what they believe is true, I think that's when problems happen.
Do you think that I have not struggled and wrestled with doubt, Doug? Do you think I devalue doubt because of my confidence level? Or do you think my confidence level has come about because I have wrestled with and valued doubt as well?
No, I don't know you, other than what you just said just now about some of your past. But when I say doubt is virtue, I mean to continually doubt, meaning that what you think is true just may not be.
Sure. But
and when someone says there's no chance I'm wrong, none, especially when it comes to deeply held beliefs, because those are the ones that really impact our lives and how we behave, that's when people start hurting other people.
Yeah,
and
I agree that confidence can brim over into arrogance, and I think that's what you're.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting at.
Yeah, and I hope I have not exuded arrogance. If I have, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
but
I think your being here is a testament to your vigilance of trying to defeat your own beliefs and trying to doubt your beliefs. So that's one thing as well.
Yeah, and I hope I haven't done so arrogantly. I really wanted to come across as somebody that really wanted a genuine conversation.
But like, if I don't know, Reed, how much longer you want to go, but like if you were witnessing to a Hindu tomorrow,
yeah,
and they listen to your story, your background, your personal testimony, some of the evidences is whatever, and that Hindu goes, wow, Daniel's making sense here, and he's making some real good points, and he's basically starting to believe the way you believe. But what happens when you guys split company and he goes to his home and you go to yours? What I've seen time and time again, especially in the Christian walk, the questions and doubts that Hindu person now has about Hinduism, they go to their temples, they go to their elders, they go to their family, and they talk about, I met Daniel and Daniel said this. And what ends up happening is that Hindu gets all the answers to all of Daniel's questions that he posed to that Hindu, and they come back to you the next week, a stronger Hindu than ever before. And I fear that you are coming on the Reed's show here, and taking these questions for the mere purpose of becoming stronger for what you already believe, and not honestly, openly considering that you might be wrong. And again, I'm saying this to myself as well. I could be wrong. And just like that Hindu who got stronger after going back to their apologists, anything that Reed and I might have said tonight, you're going to go look up with your favorite apologist, and the next time we talk, you'll have an answer for us. But if we're really valuing truth and want to figure this out together, we gotta be open and honest and realize, you know what I believe, the core propositions might not be true. You hear what I'm saying?
I do. I hope that my coming on to the show and my extolling the virtues of street epistemology and being willing to engage conversationally is conducive and demonstrable proof of my sincerity in wanting to have dialogue. Of course, as an apologist and as a Christian, I love to share the truth of what I've learned. And we can both be stubborn for what we believe, I think. And I don't think there's anything wrong with stubbornness so long as it doesn't come across as arrogance or you're shaming people. But I think that we can come across sharpened from these discussions. And I can certainly will go back and I can honestly say I will assess the way in which I engaged in this conversation and think about the propositions that were presented. I confidently hold to Christianity as much as an atheist or an agnostic confidently holds to their doubt. And I don't think, when we believe we've arrived at a certain truth, that we're going to let go of that easily. I think the desire to resolve that cognitive dissonance is within all of us. And it's not something that we should take lightly in anybody that's seeking after the truth. So, no, I hope, I can't concretely demonstrate my sincerity in this regard. I can only tell you and hope you believe me, but I have enjoyed the conversation and I have overstayed my welcome in my friend's house. So I do have to wrap up, guys.
Cool. Well, yeah, thanks again, Daniel. It was really a great conversation. And I think it went really well. It was a very nice conversation.
I enjoyed it tremendously. And
it was a complete failure because we did not make Reed cry.
We made him laugh, I think. But if you guys want to continue the conversation and Reed, you have my email, I would be happy to do so.
Totally. Yeah, I would love to.
You get a hold of me when you want to throw me in there, or Doug, if you want to have me on your show.
Sure. Yeah, you can be on Doug's show next time.
I will happily coincide. I've enjoyed talking to Doug. He's wonderful. I love talking about these things with people that can understand what you're talking about.
Yeah, I love it too. That's why I talk about it.
Reed can give you my email, and then you can get a hold of me and we can set up a time to do your show if you want.
Okay. Yeah, maybe we'll.
You let me know. It's no big deal.
Okay.
All right. And now I'll stop the broadcast and we can hang on a second and we'll say goodbye. All right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for watching.